The call came at 3:17 in the morning. My granddaughter's name lit up the screen, and I was sitting up right before the second ring finished. I've been woken up by a phone at that hour more times than I can count. For 30 years, a call like that meant one thing: someone was in trouble, and I had a narrow window to act before. Things got worse. You don't panic after enough of those calls, you just move. Her voice was low and controlled, the way a person sounds after they've cried themselves out and all that's left is the information. Grandpa, I'm at the hospital. She broke my wrist, but she told the doctor I slipped in the tub. Dad's with her. One question: which hospital? Mercy General, dear. I'm leaving now. Don't say anything to anyone until I get there. A short pause. Then, okay. I was dressed in 4 minutes and out the door by 3:22. My name is Walter Grant. I'm 63 years old. I spent 30 years as a private investigator in Raleigh, North Carolina, before I retired. I've read people for a living my entire adult life. I know the difference between a story someone is telling and a story someone has rehearsed. Sophie is 15. She's also the reason I carry a second phone line. Nobody in her household knows about a number I gave her 8 months earlier, quietly over lunch on a Tuesday when her father, Ryan, was at work. She didn't ask why I was handing it to her. She folded the paper and slid it into the small interior pocket of her jacket. Not her bag, not her back pocket, the inside pocket, the one that's harder to find. She understood exactly what I was giving her. Tonight, she used it. I pulled out of my driveway and drove through empty streets toward Mercy General. Here's what you need to understand before I tell you what happened at that hospital. I didn't walk in as a worried grandfather reacting to a crisis. I walked in as a man who had spent 8 months quietly building a case, hoping he'd never need it, and completely prepared to use every piece of it the moment he did. I saw Vanessa clearly the very first time I met her. That was 14 months earlier, at a dinner Ryan hosted to introduce her to the family. She arrived 10 minutes late with a story slightly too detailed to be spontaneous. She pulled out Ryan's chair before he reached it, but the gesture wasn't really for him. It was for the room. Within the first 20 minutes, she asked me, framed as casual curiosity, whether I still had active contacts in law enforcement, whether I owned my house outright, and what my retirement plans looked like going forward. I've spent 30 years reading people. I registered every one of those questions as inventory. I didn't say anything that night. She hadn't done anything I could point to yet, but I drove home and kept my own counsel. October was when I stopped just noticing and started documenting. Sophie showed up at my door on a Sunday afternoon without calling first. She'd ridden her bike over, which I'd call exercise rather than logistics. She was wearing a long-sleeved shirt in 68-degree weather. When she reached for her glass of water at my kitchen table, the sleeve rode up just slightly, and I saw the bruise before she could adjust it. I know the difference between a fall bruise and a contact bruise. 30 years of working with physical evidence teaches you that. She told me she'd fallen off her bike, gave me the exact block, the exact crack in the sidewalk. She'd prepared that story carefully, which told me she'd been preparing stories for a lot longer than this one incident. I didn't push. I got her some ice. I asked the ordinary questions a grandfather asks. After she left, I opened a new note on my phone. October 14th, Sophie, unannounced visit, bruise, left forearm, contact pattern, not consistent with reported bicycle fall, long sleeves, warm weather, story prepared in advance, level of detail suggests rehearsal, did not confront. That entry was the first of many. Over the next 8 months, I built the record the way I'd built case files for 30 years, methodical, no gaps, no interpretation beyond what the evidence actually supported. I noted November, when Sophie barely spoke at Thanksgiving, and Vanessa answered to questions directed at Ryan before he'd even finished opening his mouth. I noted December, when Ryan called to tell me Sophie wouldn't be staying with me for the week between Christmas and New Year's, the way she had every year since she was 4. I noted the flat tone in his voice when he said it. I noted January, when Sophie's text response time stretched from same day to 3 days to 5. The messages themselves changed to shorter, neutral, carrying that particular blankness of someone composing words they know will be read by someone else first. In February, I did 2 things. I gave Sophie the second phone number at a Tuesday lunch while Ryan was at work. I slid the folded paper across the table and told her simply, "This is a line only you have. No one else knows it exists. You never have to use it, but if you ever need to reach me and can't use your regular phone, this is how." She looked at the paper. She didn't ask why. She put it in the inside pocket of her jacket, and we talked about her history class for the rest of the hour. I also asked Ryan if I could install a dash cam in the family SUV. The reason I gave him was honest, just incomplete. The vehicle was older, I told him, and it was for insurance purposes. He said sure without asking further. I installed it myself that weekend. Entry 41 was written 5 days before the 317 call. Sunday visit restricted to 2 hours. Heavy makeup around the jaw, left side. Said it was new foundation. Possible, also possible not. Documenting. That's what I was thinking about as I drove toward Mercy General. Not panic, not anger. Just the case, running in order the way I'd built it. I pulled into the hospital parking structure at 3:39, found a spot on the second level, turned off the engine, and sat for exactly 4 seconds, not because I needed to collect myself. In 30 years of investigative work, I learned that 4 seconds of absolute stillness before you enter a room is the difference between walking in as the person who controls the situation and walking in as someone just reacting to it. I got out of the car. I knew what I was walking into. I knew what I was going to do. Marcus Webb saw me before I reached the nurse's station. I know this because I saw him see me that specific moment when recognition crosses a person's face and something underneath it shifts. Marcus was reviewing a chart at the station with a resident when the automatic doors opened and I walked through. He handed the chart to the resident without even looking at it. "Give us the room," he said. Quiet. He didn't need to be loud. Marcus Webb and I go back 12 years. I worked a case that involved his family once, a situation where the wrong people had the right paperwork, and I spent 6 weeks making sure the right people got it back. He never forgot that. I was counting on exactly that tonight. He walked toward me, halfway across the floor. He looked like a man who'd been carrying something for 2 hours and had just identified the person he could finally hand it to. "Walter, Marcus, tell me where she is and tell me what you've filed." He held my eyes for one beat. "I haven't filed anything yet." "Why not?" The stepmother corroborated her own story. "Sophie refused treatment twice while Vanessa was in the room. I wanted to know if she had family coming before I put anything permanent on record." He paused. "I had my charge nurse let her use a personal phone about 90 minutes ago." I looked at him for a moment. Marcus Webb doesn't do things without reasons. The reason he'd just given me was the right one. "Thank you," I said. "Where is she?" "Bay 4. I moved Ryan and Vanessa to the family waiting area 40 minutes ago." He lowered his voice. "Fracture pattern isn't consistent with a fall. It's consistent with forced hyperextension. I've seen it before." He paused again. "I also sent the imaging to a colleague of mine at Duke Pediatric Ortho. She confirmed my read. A beat, Walter. There's a healed fracture in the same limb. Distal ulna, 6 to 9 months old. Never received treatment." I stood very still for a moment. A fracture that healed without treatment. That meant Sophie had managed it alone, the pain of it, the covering of it, the decision not to tell anyone. I filed the feeling away. "Not now, later. File the report," I said. "Complete, accurate, everything you observed, include the mechanism inconsistency." He nodded once. "Already drafted, just waiting to confirm she had someone." "She has someone," I said. He picked up the chart and walked toward his office. I walked toward Bay 4. Sophie was sitting on the exam table with her back against the wall, left arm in a temporary splint, right knee pulled to her chest. She looked up when I pushed the curtain aside. The sound she made wasn't a word. It was a month of held breath releasing all at once. I pulled the chair close and sat at her level, not standing over her, same height. "I'm here. You're safe. Nobody comes into this room without my permission." She nodded. Her eyes were dry. She'd already passed the stage of tears, which told me she'd been managing this alone for a lot longer than tonight. I asked her to tell me what happened. I listened the way I listened to clients for 30 years, completely without steering, without reacting in ways that would cause her to edit herself. She told me about the argument that started over dinner, the specific thing she'd said that Vanessa decided was disrespectful. The hallway, Ryan in the other room, the drive to the hospital, with Vanessa explaining in a calm, organized voice exactly what Sophie had done to cause the fall. Dad was in the passenger seat, she said. He didn't turn around once. When she finished, I asked 3 questions, specific, no judgment in the tone. I needed dates. I needed to know if there were other incidents that left marks. I needed to know if anyone at school had noticed anything. Her answers took 11 minutes. I didn't interrupt once. When she finished, I put my hand over hers carefully, away from the injured arm. You did everything right tonight, calling me, keeping the phone hidden, telling me not to say anything until I got here. That was exactly right. She looked at me. What happens now? Now I make some calls, and while I do that, no one gets near you. That's not a hope, that's a fact. She held my eyes for a moment, deciding whether to believe the situation was actually under control. Okay, she said. Then, after a moment, looking down at her splinted arm, is Dad okay? I held that question for a second before answering. It's the thing about Sophie that has always made me love her with a specific kind of fierceness, even here, even now. Her first instinct is to ask about someone else. I don't know yet, I told her honestly, but that's not your job to figure out tonight. Tonight, your only job is to tell the truth to the people who are going to help you. Can you do that? Yes, she said without hesitation. I squeezed her hand once, then I stepped outside the curtain and went to work. The first call was to Denise Patterson, the charge nurse on the floor. She appeared at my elbow 30 seconds after I stepped into the hallway. Marcus had already briefed her. Denise, what's the situation in the family waiting area? The stepmothers asked twice to speak with the attending. Both times I told her the evaluation was in progress. She raised her voice the second time. I documented both interactions with timestamps. She said it with the specific tone of someone who'd been waiting to be useful and was now finally being asked to be exactly that. Keep them in that waiting area. If Vanessa tries to enter the clinical area, call security and call me at the same time. Already have security on standby, she said, and went back to her station. The second call was to Renata Cole, the hospital's on-call social worker. I had her number from a child protection task force I'd consulted on years earlier. She answered on the second ring at 4:17 in the morning. Renata, it's Walter Grant. I'm at Mercy General with a 15-year-old, suspected physical abuse by a stepmother, fracture inconsistent with the reported mechanism, father corroborating the stepmother's story. The attending has a report drafted. I need you here. 2 seconds. I'm 20 minutes out. The third call I made from the far end of the corridor near the stairwell, where there was nothing but silence. Frances Aldridge has been my attorney for 15 years. She answered on the third ring with a voice that was alert in a way that suggested she hadn't been entirely asleep. Frances, I need emergency temporary custody of my granddaughter, tonight if possible, tomorrow morning at the latest. I have a medical report being filed right now, a social worker on the way, 41 documented entries going back 8 months on my phone, and dashcam footage you're going to want to see before anyone else does. 4 seconds of silence, Frances processing, not hesitating. In 15 years I have never once seen her hesitate. Send me everything right now. I'll review it on the way, on the way. I'm already getting dressed, she said. She arrived in 31 minutes. While I waited, I pulled up the dashcam footage on my phone. Time-stamped from that very night. Vanessa driving the family SUV, Sophie visible in the back seat, clearly holding her arm, clearly in distress. They arrived at the hospital entrance. Vanessa stopped the vehicle. She sat there for 4 minutes without moving. Then she drove away. She dropped Sophie at the entrance and left. She knew exactly what had happened. She drove home before anyone could place her at the scene. The plan, I figured, was to say Sophie had gone on her own, called a ride herself. Vanessa didn't know I existed in this equation. She didn't know about the second phone. She didn't know about the dash cam. She didn't know about 41 entries sitting in a notes app going back to October. I forwarded the clip to Frances before she even walked through the door, then to Renata. When they arrived, I gave them both everything in order, without gaps.
Frances sat in the small conference room Denise had unlocked for us and read through my notes on her phone, while Renata went in to speak with Sophie. I stood outside the curtain for all 40 minutes of that interview, every single one. At the 20-minute mark, Frances looked up. Entry 37, November. Heavier coverage along the jaw, left side. You wrote possible, also possible not. She paused. That equivocation is useful. It shows you documented what you observed without overstating it. A judge reads that as credible. That's why I wrote it that way. I said. She looked at me over her reading glasses for a moment. Then she went back to reading. Renata came out at 5:03. She pulled the curtain closed behind her and walked 2 steps toward me before she spoke. Her account is consistent, detailed, and internally coherent, she said. She describes a pattern of escalating physical incidents over approximately 14 months, beginning with what she calls isolated events, and progressing in frequency and severity. Tonight was not the first time, it was the first time she sought outside help. I absorbed that without expression. How many incidents did she recall that left visible marks? 7, possibly more. She isn't ready to name all of them yet. Renata paused. She also described a pattern of isolation, phone access monitored, school activities restricted, visits to extended family systematically reduced. She placed the onset at roughly 2 months after the marriage. Beside me, Frances had lowered her phone. She was listening now, fully. She presented as credible, Renata continued. No rehearsed quality, no inconsistencies. She self-corrected twice when her memory on specific dates was uncertain, which is consistent with honest recollection rather than a fabricated account. She looked at me directly. I'm filing a mandatory report to Child Protective Services tonight. Notification goes out within the hour. Good, I said. There'll be a CPS investigator assigned by tomorrow morning. They'll want to interview Sophie separately and visit the home. She is not going back to that home before any of that happens, Frances said, not really to either of us. She was already picking up her phone. At 5:20, Denise found me at the end of the hallway. Vanessa's come back, she said. She's requesting to speak with administration. Claims the hospital is interfering in a family matter. She paused. Her effect is controlled. The kind of control that takes effort. She's been on her phone constantly. Is Ryan still in the waiting area? Yes, he hasn't spoken to her in about 40 minutes. They're sitting on opposite sides of the room. Opposite sides of the room at 5 in the morning. After a night like this one, that's information. Document every request she makes. Exact language, timestamps. Everything goes into the record. Already is, Denise said, and went back to her station. At 6:45, 2 officers from the Raleigh PD arrived at the hospital in response to Renata's CPS notification, which had triggered an automatic police referral under state protocol for physical abuse of a minor. I met Officer Dale Whitfield in the corridor before he reached the waiting area. Late 40s, wrote everything down, asked questions in a specific order that told me he'd done this before and had a system. His partner was younger and said almost nothing, just photographed everything. I gave Whitfield my name, my background, and a clean summary of the timeline, 8 months of documented observations, tonight's injury, Marcus's report, the second read from the specialist at Duke, the healed prior fracture, Renata's intake findings, the dash cam footage. I gave it to him in the order a report should be written because in my experience, the easier you make it for law enforcement to do their job, the better they do it. He wrote everything down. When I finished, he looked up. You've been documenting this since October, on your own initiative, before tonight? Yes. He held my eyes for a moment. Sir, most family members come to us after the fact with a feeling. You came to us with a case file. 30 years as a PI, I said. The habit doesn't turn off. He nodded once slowly. We'll need to speak with your granddaughter. My attorney's here. She'll coordinate that with you. Sophie's already spoken with the social worker, and she's prepared to speak with you on the condition that I remain accessible just outside the room. That's standard, he said. I know, I said. I've read the protocol. He almost smiled. At 6:58, Andrea Simmons, the school principal, called me back. I'd reached out to her at 6 o'clock on the dot because she'd given me her personal number 2 years earlier after I gave a safety presentation to her staff. She answered on the 4th ring. Walter, is everything all right? No, I said. I need to talk to you about Sophie, and I need you to tell me honestly whether your staff has documented anything about her this year." A pause that wasn't hesitation, recognition. "How much time do you have?" "As much as you need." What Andrea told me over the next 18 minutes filled in gaps I hadn't been able to close from the outside. Her guidance counselor had a conversation with Sophie in September that Sophie ended abruptly the moment she spotted Vanessa's car in the pickup line. The counselor had documented it in her case notes because Sophie had seemed on the verge of saying something specific and then visibly shut down. She'd flagged it internally, but it hadn't reached the threshold for mandatory reporting because Sophie hadn't disclosed anything directly. There was a creative writing assignment from November, a fictional story about a girl who made herself invisible at home. The teacher had kept it, not because of any single explicit line, but because of the cumulative texture of it. It read, Andrea said, like someone describing something real through the thinnest possible layer of fiction. And in February, Sophie had missed 4 days of school, reported by the family as a stomach illness. The timing had registered with Andrea without her fully knowing why. She'd noted it in her own records. "Andrea," I said, "I need a written statement of everything you just told me, not the assignments themselves, just what your staff observed, what was documented, and when. Can you have something to my attorney by 8 o'clock this morning?" "I can have it by 7:30, she said. "Walter, is she okay?" "She will be," I said, and this time I meant it in the present tense, not the future. At 7:04, Francis received confirmation from Judge Elaine Cortez's clerk that the emergency custody petition had been received and was under review. At 7:30, Andrea's written statement arrived in Francis's email, 3 pages, specific dates, specific staff names, specific observations. Francis read it in 4 minutes, made 2 notes, and looked up at me. "This is enough," she said, combined with everything else. In 15 years, I have heard Francis say those 3 words exactly 3 times before today. Each time she was right. "How long?" I asked. "Judge Cortez reviews it personally. Her clerk says she's in the office by 8. She checked her watch. Less than an hour." I went back to Bay 4. Sophie was awake, sitting in the same position against the wall. The blanket Denise had left folded at the end of the table was now pulled around her shoulders. She looked at me when I came in. "You've been out there a long time," she said. "I've been working," I said. I sat down in the chair. "There's something I want to ask you. When this goes further, and it will go further, there may come a point where someone asks you to speak in front of a courtroom. You don't have to decide anything right now, but I want you to know that option exists, and it's yours to make." "Not mine." She was quiet for a moment. "Would it matter?" "Your words, combined with everything else we have, would matter a great deal." She looked at the wall for a moment, then back at me. "I'll think about it, that's all I'm asking," I said. Francis called at 8:14. I was standing at the coffee machine at the end of the hallway, the one that produces something that resembles coffee the way a sketch resembles a photograph. The judge signed, she said, 2 words that rearranged everything that came after them. Emergency temporary custody. 90 days, effective immediately. You are Sophie's legal guardian as of 8:09 this morning. Vanessa has been formally notified that she's prohibited from any contact with the minor. Ryan's been notified as a secondary party. He retains parental rights, but all decisions regarding Sophie's welfare during the custody period require your authorization. I set down the coffee I was never going to drink anyway. Francis, thank you. Don't thank me yet. 90 days goes fast. We need to build the permanent case in parallel. This buys us time. It doesn't finish the work. I know, I said. What do I do first? Tell your granddaughter, she said. Everything else can wait 10 minutes. I pulled the curtain aside quietly. Sophie was awake, had been awake for a while, I think, in the way people are awake before they let themselves be seen awake, holding on to the last few minutes before the world requires something of them. She looked at me. I sat down in the chair. I told her simply, in the same direct language I've used with clients for 30 years, because Sophie had earned directness, and I've never believed that protecting people from information actually protects them from anything. A judge signed an emergency custody order at 8:09 this morning. You're coming home with me. Vanessa cannot contact you. That's not a plan. It's a legal fact as of 45 minutes ago. She stared at me. 45 minutes ago. I didn't want to tell you until it was done, I said. I don't deal in maybes. Something moved across her face. Not one thing, several in quick succession, the way a person processes news they needed to hear and had stopped letting themselves want. She pressed her lips together. Her chin did the thing chins do when a person is deciding whether to cry and then deciding not to. She decided not to. Okay. She said, then, after a moment, can we get real coffee before we go home? The stuff here tastes like hot cardboard. I looked at her for one beat. There's a place 2 blocks from my house that opens at 8:30, I said. You can have whatever you want. For the first time since I'd pushed that curtain aside at 4 o'clock in the morning, she smiled. Brief, tired, completely real. Before we left, I found Ryan in the family waiting area. He was alone. Vanessa was gone. Officer Whitfield told me she'd left voluntarily after being informed of the custody order and the no-contact provision. Left without incident, which Whitfield noted with the quiet surprise of someone who'd been braced for more. Ryan looked like a man who'd been awake all night, sitting inside a decision he hadn't made yet. He looked up when I walked in. I sat across from him, not beside him. This conversation required him to see my face. I told him about the custody order. I told him about the dash cam footage and exactly what it showed. I told him about the 41 entries going back to October. I told him about the healed fracture that was 6 to 9 months old and had never received treatment. I did not tell him what Sophie had described about specific incidents. That was hers to share in her own time, not mine. He listened. He didn't look away. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I should have seen it. There were a lot of things I could have said to that. I chose the one that was most useful. You can see it now, I said. That option's still open. He looked at his hands. Is she okay? She's going to be okay, I said. She already ordered coffee. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I put my card on the table in front of him. My personal cell, the same number I'd given Sophie 8 months earlier. When you're ready to talk, I said. Not before, but when you are. I left him there with the card and whatever he was working through. I couldn't work through it for him, and trying would have insulted the intelligence I know he has. Vanessa was charged 9 days later, 2 counts of felony assault causing bodily injury to a minor, 1 count of domestic violence, 1 count of child endangerment. The dash cam footage, combined with the healed prior fracture and 41 documented entries, moved it from misdemeanor to felony. The DA noted specifically that the footage demonstrated prior knowledge of the injury. She knew, she planned, she just didn't plan for me. 3 months after that phone call, I'm sitting on my front porch on a Tuesday morning when I hear Sophie laughing at something on her phone inside the house. Not the careful laugh I'd catalogued in entries 11 through 19, the one she used when Vanessa was in the room. The other kind, the one that comes before the brain decides whether it's appropriate. I keep writing what I'm writing, but I mark the moment. 6 weeks after the custody order, Sophie told me she'd decided to testify at the trial. She didn't ask my opinion first. She told me afterward, which is the correct order. I kept thinking, if I don't say it out loud, it's like it didn't happen, she said. And it happened. I looked at her for a moment. That's exactly right. I said. She said, Francis told me our case is pretty much airtight. Francis is rarely wrong, I said. She said, pretty much, not completely. Francis never says completely, I said. That's how you know she's good. Sophie almost smiled. You and Francis are the same person, she said. I thought about it. We both keep good notes, I said. That night, I opened my phone and wrote entry 47. Sophie laughed today. The real kind, logging it. There are things I would do differently. There's one I haven't said out loud yet, and I want to say it now. I would have given her that phone number in October, not February. Those 4 months between when I knew and when I acted, those are 4 months I can't give back. The outcome was the same. That doesn't make those months not have happened. She managed them alone, with a composure that should never have been required of a 15-year-old. I carry that, not as punishment, as information, as the thing that makes me, going forward, someone who acts on what he knows 1 step sooner than he's comfortable acting. That's the only use a mistake ever really has. She called me at 3:17 in the morning because she had a number that worked and she believed I would come. That's the whole of it. The 41 entries, the dash cam, the custody order, the charges, all of it proceeds from that one fact. She believed I would come. If you're watching this and you have a gut feeling about someone in your family's life, something that registered but you haven't been able to name yet, do not wait for confirmation. Document what you see. Write it down with dates. Trust what a lifetime of living has already taught you to recognize. The people who need you are counting on you to act before the night everything goes wrong, not after. I came because I was ready. That is the whole of it. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And check out more stories like this one here on the Revenge Hub.